Habakkuk. I asked Karen on the way here this evening, I said, what do you know about the book of Habakkuk? And she goes, well, I know it follows Nahum or something like that. I know where it is. And I said, well, that's good. I said, what do you know about Nahum? And she goes, well, it comes before Habakkuk. I said, I just preached on Nahum last week. So anyway, hopefully you remember about Nahum and the doom of Nineveh and all of those things that we talked about. I know these are overview messages, but certainly want to find some application for us as well. So Habakkuk, verse 1, it says, the burden which Habakkuk the prophet did see. O Lord, how long shall I cry, and thou wilt not hear? Even cry out unto thee of violence, and thou wilt not save. Why dost thou show me iniquity, and cause me to behold grievance? For spoiling and violence are before me, and there are that raise up strife and contention. Therefore the law is slacked, and judgment doth never go forth, for the wicked doth compass about the righteous. Therefore wrong judgment proceedeth. That's the beginning of Habakkuk's questioning here, but let's jump to chapter 2, verse 4, kind of the key verse of the book. Chapter 2, verse 4, it says, behold, his soul which is lifted up is not upright in him, but the just shall live by his faith. The just shall live by faith. So we're talking tonight about living by faith in a wicked world. How do you live by faith in a wicked world? Let's pray. Father, thank you for bringing us together tonight. I'm thankful for the songs that we were able to sing about leaning on the everlasting arms and about how it is well with our soul, knowing, Lord, that you are in control of all these things. And so, Lord, as we study this minor prophet of Habakkuk tonight, I pray, Father, that you would help us to understand what his prophecy was all about, and more than just understanding, and I pray that your Holy Spirit would give us something relevant for our own lives tonight. In Christ's name, amen. Habakkuk falls into 3 chapters. Sometimes chapter divisions are more arbitrary than anything, but in this sense, in this case, they really do help you understand the outline and the layout of the book, of the prophecy. The prophecy itself is almost a poem. It's a song that would have been sung in the form of a psalm of lament. Matter of fact, the only place that you'll find the word Selah, other than the book of Psalms, is right here in Habakkuk, because it is a song just like the Psalms are. And so he begins talking about the violence, he says, and iniquity, and grievance, and spoiling, and all these things that are going on. And he even says, why dost thou show me these things? You ever heard the statement, ignorance is bliss? That sometimes it's better just not even to know all the bad that's going on around you. And he says, well, I know. I see it. I see what's happening in our world, and I don't like it. He's talking about his own people in Jerusalem. He's ministering after Nahum. Remember, Nahum is prophesying about the fall of Nineveh. Okay, Nineveh of the Assyrians. And the Assyrians now have fallen. Babylon is becoming the new world power on the stage. So between the fall of Nineveh and the fall of Jerusalem, Habakkuk comes to preach. He's writing along the same time as Jeremiah. So if you're ever reading in Jeremiah or about Jeremiah in the Kings and Chronicles, you can kind of read between the lines that Habakkuk is right there talking about his own people. And he says, I'm looking at my people, I'm looking at Judah, and they're wicked. Because Josiah was the last good king. And once Josiah was gone, all of the good that he tried to do, he tried putting away the idols, he tried putting away all the wickedness out of the land. As soon as he died, all of his reforms died with him. And his sons that followed after him were worthless, awful kings. And the state of Judah just kept going down, down, down. And so he said, Habakkuk has this question for God, and he's saying, God, I'm looking around and I see our people are violent. They are grievous. There's all kinds of wickedness going rampant. The law is slacked. Judgment doth never go forth. Why are you letting these people get away with this? He has a question for God. The prophecy isn't so much directed at a nation. It's not directed at a people. It's directed to God. Habakkuk has questions for God. And thankfully, God has some answers for Habakkuk. And he's going to teach us some things in the process. So here's his question. He's talking about the injustice, the wickedness of his people. And so God responds to him. Verse 5. Behold, ye among the heathen, and regard and wonder marvelously, for I will work a work in your days, which ye will not believe, though it be told you. For lo, I raise up the Chaldeans. It's another name for the Babylonians. The Chaldeans are coming. I'm raising them up, that bitter and hasty nation, which shall march through the breadth of the land to possess the dwelling places that are not theirs. They are terrible and dreadful. Their judgment and their dignity shall proceed of themselves. Their horses also are swifter than the leopards and are more fierce than the evening wolves. And their horsemen shall spread themselves, and their horsemen shall come from far. They shall fly as the eagle that hasteth to eat. They shall come all for violence. Their faces shall sup up as the east wind, and they shall gather the captivity as the sand. And they shall scoff at the kings, and the princes shall be a scorn unto them. They shall deride every stronghold, for they shall heap dust and take it. Then shall his mind change, and he shall pass over and offend, imputing his power unto his God. So he's talking about the rise of the Chaldeans. And so Habakkuk is saying, Lord, don't you see the wickedness? Do you think that perhaps there are some people, some Christians that are looking around at the United States of America, at the world in which we are, and say, Lord, why are you tarrying? When you see all of this wickedness, and you see all of this injustice, and you see all of this oppression and terrorism and murder and all of this, why do you wait? Why not just come? Why does Jesus not just come and launch the tribulation period and call us out of here and let's just get this thing going, right? And Habakkuk is of the same mind. Why are you allowing this to go on? And God says, you know what? Just wait. Just wait a little bit. I have a plan to deal with my people. I am going to punish everything that you're talking about, Habakkuk. All of it is wicked. It does deserve to be punished. And my punishment is coming. And I'm raising up the Chaldeans to do it. And so Habakkuk is listening here. And at this point he goes, that raises another question for me. How could you allow the Chaldeans to come and conquer us? They're worse than we are. Look at what he says here, verse 12. Art thou not from everlasting, O Lord my God, mine Holy One? We shall not die. O Lord, thou hast ordained them for judgment. And Almighty God, thou hast established them for correction. Thou art of purer eyes than to behold evil, and canst not look on iniquity. Wherefore lookest thou upon them that deal treacherously, and holdest thy tongue? But catch this: when the wicked devoureth the man that is more righteous than he. Now I know, God, that I was just calling for the punishment of Judah. But how do you justify it, Lord, to take a people like the Babylonians, who are even worse, and use them to punish us? And probably it was debatable whether or not they were really worse. Okay, the Bible says in various places that the sin of Israel had become more wicked than the Amorites, whom God had already cleansed out of the land. And so they were very wicked in Judah. They just weren't quite as violent of oppressors to other kingdoms and stuff as the Babylonians were. And so Habakkuk is going, wait a minute. You see, sometimes these prophets had to reconcile with some of the justice of God. We saw that with Jonah. Remember Jonah? He goes to Nineveh and he says, if ever a people did not deserve to be spared, it's Nineveh. I knew you would do it, though. I knew that if they repented, you would spare them. So that's why I fled. And so he's questioning God and his justice there. And Obadiah is calling out and saying, what about these Edomites? They need to be destroyed. And Nahum is saying, yeah, how about the Ninevites? What about them? And Habakkuk is saying, Babylonians? Seriously? You're going to use this wicked, wicked people of the Chaldeans to chasten your people? How do you do that, God? How does this make sense in your economy? I was reading a commentator that wrote, in the 50s or so, 1950s. And so in his mind, what's fresh upon him was World War II. And he's a British writer. And so he was writing and saying, we know that the sins of Great Britain are awful. We know that the sins of Europe were terrible. But for God to chasten us with the Nazis and the wickedness that was pouring out of Germany, how could God do that? And yet, of course, we see that God had a plan even for them. And so now he's going on, he's talking about how violent they are, and he's bringing this case to God, saying, God, you're the eternal God. You can't let us be swallowed up by Babylon and all of that. And so then chapter 2, verse 1, he says, I will stand upon my watch and set me upon the tower, and will watch to see what he will say unto me, and what I shall answer when I am reproved. So he asks his question, and then he says, you know what, I'm just going to sit and wait and see what God shows me about this. It's actually a very good lesson in the book of Habakkuk about how to reconcile questions with God. When you've got questions for God, and you say, God, this doesn't make sense in my mind, it's okay to bring God questions. It's okay to bring him the things that you're struggling with. And I'm trying to grapple with this. I'm trying to figure this thing out. And it's okay to bring that stuff to God. But don't demand an answer. Just sit back and wait and say, okay, God, I've given you my question. Now speak to me. And show me what the answer might be. Help me to understand your ways. So chapter 1 starts with the burden. Do you see that in verse 1? Chapter 1 is a burden, and it's about his faith grappling with these problems. Chapter 2 is about a vision. Chapter 2, verse 2, it says, And the Lord answered me and said, Write the vision, and make it plain upon tables, that he may run that readeth it. And he's just saying there, make it big. I want you to get this, and I want you to get it straight. I want you to make it plain. I want everybody to understand my ways. Verse 3, For the vision is yet for an appointed time, but at the end of it shall speak and not lie. Though it tarry, catch this, wait for it, because it will surely come. It will not tarry. Behold, his soul, which is lifted up, is not upright in him, but the just shall live by his faith. And then he goes on to talk about the Chaldeans. He says, you know, Habakkuk, you raise a good point. The Chaldeans are also a very wicked people. And so he's explaining in here how that God's process oftentimes is that he will raise up a people to chasten those who are wrong. And then he will turn around and he will then punish those who punish the first group because of their violence and their oppression. And you say, well, that's a crazy cycle. Well, he's ruling sovereign over the nations, and he is figuring all these things out until he comes and he rules on high. And so he's saying, you know what, Habakkuk, don't worry about injustice, okay? I've got this all figured out. Yes, there's wickedness in Judah. I've got a plan for that. Yeah, but I don't like your plan. Well, I've got a plan for them as well. I'm also going to bring destruction to the Babylonians. And so through Habakkuk, he issues these 5 woes upon the nation of Babylon and the Chaldeans. Look at verse 5. Let's just work through these woes here. Yea, also, because he transgresseth by wine, he is a proud man. Proud man. Makes me think of Nebuchadnezzar. Somebody's lifted up, and the wine that would flow there in Babylon. A proud man neither keepeth at home, who enlargeth his desire as hell, and is as death, and cannot be satisfied, but gathereth unto him all nations, and heapeth unto him all people. Shall not all these take up a parable against him, and a taunting proverb against him, and say, Woe to him that increaseth that which is not his? How long? and to him that ladeth himself with thick clay, shall they not rise up suddenly, that shall bite thee, and a wig that shall vex thee, and thou shalt be for booties unto them, because thou hast spoiled many nations. So the first woe upon the Chaldeans is their oppression and their violence. Because of how violent of a people that they are, they're taking things that don't belong to them. They're gobbling up the kingdoms of the earth. He says, woe unto them for that. Verse 9, woe to him that coveteth an evil covetousness to his house, that he may set his nest on high, that he may be delivered from the power of evil. This is talking about his greed and covetousness, not just his, as in Nebuchadnezzar, but the whole empire, that they coveted. They wanted more, that nothing was enough. And he declares a woe, a doom unto them. Verse 12 of chapter 2. Woe to him that buildeth a town with blood, and establisheth a city by iniquity. Behold, is it not of the Lord of hosts that the people shall labor in the very fire, and the people shall weary themselves for very vanity? He's talking about they're enslaving innocent people. They would enslave all these people from all the different far-flung regions of the world, and they would put them to work, these innocent people, and he would build the empire on their backs. And that was very common in all of the Gentile kingdoms of the world. And he says, you know what? Woe unto them for that. Verse 14, a little nugget, a little prophecy. For the earth shall be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord, as the waters cover the sea. And then he says, verse 15, woe unto him that giveth his neighbor drink, that puttest thy bottle to him, and makest him drunken also, that thou mayest look on their nakedness. Thou art filled with shame for glory. Drink thou also, and let thy foreskin be uncovered. The cup of the Lord's right hand shall be turned unto thee, and shameful spewing shall be on thy glory. And so the fourth woe is about drunkenness. And woe unto them that giveth his neighbor drink. Okay? And then verse 18, he starts talking about idolatry and idols. What profiteth the graven image that the maker thereof hath graven it? The molten image and a teacher of lies, that the maker of his work trusteth therein to make dumb idols. Woe unto him that saith to the wood, awake, to the dumb stone, arise, it shall teach. Behold, it is laid over with gold and silver, and there is no breath at all in the midst of it. But the Lord is in his holy temple. Let all the earth keep silence before him. I know that's a lot to take in. I know we're sitting here and your eyes are glazing over. Woes and Chaldeans and all this stuff. I get it. I understand. But so chapter 1 is his burden. This is his burden, where his faith is grappling with the problems. Chapter 2 is a vision from God, where his faith is grasping the solution. That God has a plan in all of this. And God is saying, yes, I'm going to use the Babylonians, but also proclaim woe and destruction upon the Babylonians. And then chapter 3 is a prayer. And this is where the poetry really starts to soar. And so what's beautiful is that Habakkuk goes from this big question mark at the beginning of the book, and at the end he's singing, he's glorifying. And in our little outline here, chapter 3 is a prayer where faith is glorying in assurance that God has given to him. Verse 1 of chapter 3, a prayer of Habakkuk, the prophet, upon Shigionoth. Okay, a certain way of singing in a triumphant tone and so on. And verse 2, he says, O Lord, I have heard thy speech and was afraid. O Lord, revive thy work in the midst of the years. In the midst of the years, make known in wrath. Remember mercy. I love how I know it might seem a little bit repetitive as we've gone through all of these prophets. But these things go together, that in the prophets they're proclaiming wrath and judgment, but they are also proclaiming mercy and restoration, that God has a plan through all of these things. And so even though the Babylonians are coming, there will be a remnant, and God's promises will still ring true. And he's saying, Lord, I'm going to pray right now that you revive your people. And I'm praying that in the midst of all the wrath, that you would remember mercy. And then he goes on to very poetically sing and talk about all that God has done for people and for his people, for Israel, even how he appears to them. Look at some of the descriptive tones here, verse 3. God came from Teman, and the Holy One from Mount Haran, Selah. His glory covered the heavens, and the earth was full of his praise. And his brightness was as the light. He had horns coming out of his hand, and there was the hiding of his power. Before him went the pestilence, and burning coals went forth at his feet. He stood and measured the earth. He beheld and drove asunder the nations. And the everlasting mountains were scattered. The perpetual hills did bow. His ways are everlasting. Then he talks about the Red Sea crossing and the way that he made, verse 11, the sun and the moon stood still in their habitation. You remember when Joshua and the children of Israel are coming into the land and they're going forth to battle, and Joshua needs that extra time in order to finish the battle, and so he calls out and says, sun, stand still. Moon, stay right there. And it stayed for about a whole day, and they didn't go down. He's talking about all these things. God, you've done this for us, and you've done this for us, and you've done this for us. And so this song, it's looking to the past, and it's praising all that God has done for his people. Because you know what? That's a faith builder. You got to look to the past sometimes to be able to see what God can do for you in the future. One thing that helps me have confidence in the future for Northwoods Baptist Church is when I look back at where he's brought us from. All right? So today, I mentioned this morning, today is 5 years since our first service over in Beltrami Electric. And what a journey it's been. How God has just opened doors, and he's brought you, and he's brought people alongside, and he's brought us into this building and into this community, and it's wonderful. And so he's done miracles on our behalf, miracles. And knowing what he's done for us helps us have confidence for where we're headed in the future. And you've got to do that in your own life as well. Because I'm telling you, I'm looking out here, and I haven't known you all for your entire lives, but I know this: you're not where you used to be. When you think about where he's brought you from, in your salvation, in your sanctification, your walk with him, now, you know, you may have, there was probably a time in your life when you could have never pictured the day when you and your family loved coming to church, sitting down in this independent, fundamental Baptist church, listening to preaching week after week, and that you hated up and loved it. There was probably a time in your life where you would have said, not me. That is not my life, right? And now look where he's brought you. Look at what he's done in your heart. And look what he's done in your families. And it's fantastic how he's just opened up all these doors for you by faith. And what's coming? He'll do the same. He'll do more of the same. He'll bring you even further. He'll make you more of what he wants you to be. And so chapter 3, half of it, or more than half, verses 1 through 16, it's praise for the past. And then the end of the book is confidence for the future. He says in verse 17, although the fig tree shall not blossom, neither shall fruit be in the vines. The labor of the olive shall fail, and the fields shall yield no meat. The flock shall be cut off from the fold, and there shall be no herd in the stalls. Yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will joy in the God of my salvation. The Lord God is my strength, and he will make my feet like hinds' feet. He will make me to walk upon my high places, to the chief singer on my stringed instruments. And so what's verse 17 they're talking about? He's just saying, you know, if there comes a time, he's reached this point in his faith where he's decided the just shall live by faith. I guess I don't have to know all of how it's going to work out. And that's what God's purpose in this book is. Say, listen, I've got this. All the nations, all your worries about injustice and this going on, I've got it figured out. I've got a plan. I'm working it out. And if you don't like that plan, hey, tough. I've got another plan, back that up. And eventually, the whole earth will be filled with the knowledge of the Lord. Did you catch that in chapter 2, verse 14? The whole earth is going to be filled one day with the knowledge of the Lord. I will rule over this whole earth. But my job for you, Habakkuk, and you, Judah, And New Northwoods Baptist Church is this, verse 4. Live by faith. Live by faith. And so Habakkuk embraces this by the end of it, to where there's no more question marks in his mind. Instead, his faith has come full circle now. And he says, you know what? If there's no figs on the trees, if there's no grapes on the vine, if there's no flocks, if there's no herds, meaning if the end of the world comes, the mountains fall into the sea, the sun stops shining, no matter what happens, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to joy in the Lord. I'm going to make him my strength. No matter what comes in my life, no matter what comes in my nation's life, I will rejoice in the Lord. I will joy in the God of my salvation. Well, how do you do that? When everything's falling apart, when your life is unraveling, when everything seems in chaos and turmoil, how do you live in joy? By faith. Right. That's how God has designed the just to live. That's how God has designed Christians to live by faith. And he says, you know what? When the Babylonians come, you're going to be all worried about, oh, we're going to be annihilated and so on. You won't be annihilated. The Babylonians aren't going to destroy everything. Listen, back to chapter 2, verse 4. Behold, his soul, which is lifted up, is not upright in him. Chaldeans, they're not going to last. But those who are just, they'll live forever. Those who abide in faith, they'll live forever. Turn to Romans chapter 1. Romans 1, verse 16, for I am not ashamed of the gospel of Christ. For it is the power of God and the salvation to everyone that believeth, to the Jew first and also to the Greek. For therein is the righteousness of God revealed from faith to faith, as it is written, the just shall live by faith. That's how salvation is designed to work. It's designed to be by faith. Where did Paul get that? For it is written. From Habakkuk. Look at Galatians. Galatians chapter 3. I have a feeling that this became one of Paul's favorite verses. Galatians chapter 3. Verse 10. For as many as are of the works of the law are under the curse. For it is written, cursed is everyone that continueth not in all things which are written in the book of the law to do them. But that no man is justified by the law in the sight of God, it is evident, for the just shall live by faith. And the law is not of faith, but the man that doeth them shall live in them. What's Paul's application of all this? And it's important to see Habakkuk in the context of the New Testament, that Paul is saying, listen, you people that are so caught up in working towards your salvation, you think that you are earning it, you think that you're getting there, you think that it's getting more and more and more closer, that you're doing the works of the law, and one day it's all the good stuff is going to outweigh the bad stuff. He says, no. God has set up this program of salvation to be this, that the just, the saved, the righteous, the only way that they're going to live eternally is if they do it by faith. Belief. Faith in Jesus Christ, not by the works of the law. Look at Hebrews chapter 10. Hebrews chapter 10, verse 38. Now the just shall live by faith. But if any man draw back, my soul shall have no pleasure in him. It's talking about now that you are saved, guess how you're supposed to live? By faith. You got saved by faith alone, without works of the law. Now that you're saved, you want to keep on pleasing him, you want to keep on living for him, you want to keep on growing, you don't do that by your own works. You see, we can get into that mindset sometimes once we're saved, like, okay, now I've got that taken care of, now I'm just going to kind of pull myself up by my bootstraps and I'll become more godly. It doesn't work that way. If you're going to live this Christian life, you're going to live it by faith. And except a man, for chapter 11 of Hebrews, verse 6, but without faith it is impossible to please him. For he that cometh to God must believe that he is, and that he's a rewarder of them that diligently seek him. You still, friend, you still need to live by faith. You still need every day the grace of God. Your works is not going to get you there. Your works is not going to make you more godly. It's not going to make you pleasing in his sight. Every day we need to live by faith. Every day we live by grace. Back to Habakkuk. That just almost rhymes. Back to Habakkuk. Chapter 1, he has a burden. His faith is grappling with these problems. Have you ever had a problem with God's ways? The way he does things? Maybe in the world, maybe in your own life. And you just say, God, I don't get it. I just don't get what you're doing here. Okay? Faith can grapple sometimes with these things. And there's an honest way to bring those things to God and bring those doubts to God and say, God, show me. And then number 2, he gets this vision, chapter 2, of faith grasping the solution and seeing God's in control of all this. Verse 14, the earth shall be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord. And then chapter 3 is a prayer where his faith is glorying in this assurance. For verse 18 he says, yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will joy in the God of my salvation. The Lord God is my strength. So I just wanted to share with you tonight about the book of Habakkuk and to tell you it's okay to grapple with some things as long as you bring it to God honestly. And then the answer to all of it is this: live by faith. We need him. We can't do it on our own. You don't have the answers. You don't have the strength, and neither do I. We need to live by this book and by faith. That's the only way you can make it through this wicked world. And it's a blessing. There's the little book of Habakkuk in a nutshell. Let's pray. Father, thank you for this word that you've given to us from the minor prophets. And Lord, I know that they can be a bit to process. It's a lot of content to chew on here in one setting. Lord, I pray that you would just help us to be people of faith and to lay these things to heart the same way that the Apostle Paul did, that we know every day that if I'm going to please you, if I'm going to do what's right, and I'm going to grow, and I'm going to be sanctified as a Christian, and I'm going to understand what you're doing in the world, Lord, it's got to be by faith. That is how you designed for us to live. And Lord, one day our faith will become sight when we stand before you.